CISO Talk time. Hey everyone, James Azar here with CISO Talk podcast. That's right. No sales, no junk, just practitioner talk only. That's it. You won't hear anyone trying to sell you anything about how this latest, greatest technology is going to solve all world problems. It won't. Part of a process. Joining me on our podcast today is one of my favorite people, Kausar Kenning. She was on our podcast before, and so Kausar's an awesome person, just general brilliant
Thank you.
mind in cyber, and really what she does now, which is VP of Cyber Fraud Analytics, is absolutely critical in the age of COVID-19, in the age of work from home, in how the new norm might look like, and how these analytics now start to play a more critical role in understanding insider threats and so much more. We're going to be talking a lot about that today. Before we bring Kausar on the show, though, we're going to take a quick break to hear one 60-second commercial from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, I really want you to help me in supporting our early sponsor, Get Smart Eye. So Get Smart Eye still in beta testing, but what Get Smart Eye is, it's an amazing app that lets you control your privacy, whether it be documents, pictures, anything that you want to share with your friends or not. Think of Snapchat, only no screenshots and no one else looking over it. So if you travel a lot, if you're in airports, coffee shops, shared workspaces, and you care about your privacy, Get Smart Eye is the right app for you to protect your privacy. And here's the deal. Get Smart Eye is still in beta testing. I use the app all the time. In fact, some of you know that I travel a lot, and when I do, I don't like people looking at my screen at airports. I do everything off my phone, and as such, I use Get Smart Eye for all my sensitive documents and all my planning. So here's what you need to do to be one of our early technology adapters, an exclusive offer for CyberHub Engage listeners. Text 41411, again, that's 41411, 41411, and type in the message of your text, Smart Eye. Then reply to the SMS that you're going to get with the letter Y, like Yankee, and download the Apple Test Flight app. Then go back to your SMS and you'll get a link to download the Smart Eye app. Download the Smart Eye app and use it. Again, this is an early offer for only CyberHub users. Text 41411. Again, that's 41411 with Smart Eye in the message. Kausar, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, James. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
You know, I love having you on, and we always have like these very, very long offline conversations, and they always bring about like, this would be such an awesome topic to talk about.
Yes.
And you know, kind of before we get into before we start geeking out over analytics, because we're going to
Of course,
here in just a moment, folks. But before we do that, quickly, for those who might be our first time listeners, our base has grown since the last time you were on. Would you just give them a little intro into your background, how you got into cyber and how you ended up where you are today?
sure. So actually got into cyber about, wow, it's been a while now, but I first started with fraud, and I was at American Express, and we worked on an online platform that helps support other clients and their online transactions. So really started through the fraud aspect, and then kind of got into cyber just as by accident, to be honest. Realized there was some anomalous behavior happening in terms of our site being attacked, and found out, just that deep dive led me into cyber. And then since then, I've just been kind of like, hey, it was a passion. It was something I was really interested in. It's very exciting stuff. And I really got a good break a couple of years ago when a CISO needed some help and he didn't have enough staff, and I volunteered. And that's where I got my deep dive into cyber. And ever since, it's been a really cool position of cyber fraud that I've gotten into. So yeah, it was totally by accident, but such a great accident. I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
I feel like cyber, there's no one career course, right? You want to be an accountant, you go to school, you're really good at math or algebra, you enjoyed that in high school, you were weird like that. And then, you know, when you were 17 and you're applying for college and people were like, what are you going to do with your life? You didn't say a fireman. You didn't say I'm going to go do liberal arts and find and discover myself in college. No, you said accounting. And you went and you became an accountant or a lawyer. And that track is similar, right? That track's pretty much like there's no different story. So how'd you become a lawyer? And they're like, I went to law school. When did you know you wanted to be a lawyer? When I started answering my mom, when I started to learn how to speak.
There you go. Exactly.
Right. But in cyber, that's never the case. How'd you start in cyber? Well, I was in the military. I wasn't really on the computer stuff. I was on the gun stuff. But then I decided to go into the computer stuff and somehow ended up in cyber.
Right.
And those stories are like 10 times fold all the time. It's so awesome. It's really fascinating. Kind of looking at leadership, I think it's so important when we talk about cyber to talk about leadership. You know, not one person makes a cyber team, not one person makes a cyber company, not one person makes a company secure from a cyber perspective. It's obviously a team effort, and it's predominantly by leaders. Last night I was hanging out with a bunch of friends. One of them who's a big time, you know, cyber executive somewhere, and his company has gone through an incident recently, and our joke around was, you know, how does an incident get started? And well, it starts with the head. But as we talk about leadership a little bit, what are some of the key skills and qualities you look for when you're picking people to join your team?
Well, for my team specifically, I mean, you have to have the basics. You need to understand data science, understand the technology you'd use. So from the technical standpoint, there are skill sets that I'm not going to compromise on. From the soft skill side, it's a little different. I need to see that a person who has the ability to, you know, find those patterns and trends, like a curious kind of personality, and the ability to kind of, you know, with analytics, it's kind of crazy because you'll go down a rabbit hole and sometimes you'll find incredible things by going down those rabbit holes, but you need to be willing to do that. And that's the kind of person I look for, somebody who's curious. They're excited by it because cyber fraud, it's always changing. If you're looking for, you know, a day-to-day, this is what I do every single day, that's not going to happen in this area. Every day, the fraud tactics are changing, the cyber threats are changing. You have to want to be up to speed, and that means doing the extra work, listening to podcasts such as yours, and learning as much as you can, reading blogs, and whatever you can to stay abreast of what's happening in the environment. And sometimes it's interesting to see because people just, you know, like, hey, I just like building visualizations or whatever. No, I need somebody who can do it all. So I do look for people who are self-taught. I'm not too, you know, certifications are great, but I like people who, you know, hey, they're scrappy, you know, they want to figure it out and they'll do whatever it takes to get it figured out.
Yeah, I think to do cyber fraud analytics, which is different from maybe being a SOC analyst, right, requires trying to really think like the other guy. It's almost like a blue teamer or a purple teamer, right?
Right.
Like red teaming is so popular. Like everyone you meet, like that wants to go into cyber is like, I want to be a red teamer. I want to be a pen tester. And I'm like, why don't you want to be a blue teamer or a purple teamer?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's really because a lot of people go, well, blue teaming is boring. It's all about fixing vulnerabilities. And I'm like, it's also about predicting something before it happens and then patching it so it doesn't happen. And there's an inherent thread with looking at your infrastructure or your architecture or your network and going, that port or that door could be a problem. Let me go fix it. Let me try to break it and fix it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell my people, you know, think like a criminal. Don't become one, but think like one. Because
thin
that's
line.
the only way we're going to...
Thin line, Kausar. Thin line.
Very much so. Well, they get it. That's really important because as we're looking at these new fraud trends and, you know, social engineering and how it's being used to commit the fraud, you really need to think like, hey, how would I get ahead of this? And those who can think like that are very successful.
Yeah, I find that that's the only way you're able to really build a good teamwork is when different people come and go, well, I would attack it this way, I would attack it that way, I would come at it this way, and this is how I would do it. And you find that even so I love watching crime stories, like the documentaries, where they're interviewing, like, this robber thought he could get away with stealing $10 million. And he got caught because of this one mistake. And then you realize it wasn't just that one mistake, it was a series of mistakes, and it was law enforcement really getting a step ahead on the person. And so that was really fascinating. So when you look at security leaders in general, and you've obviously worked with some great CISOs, and you do at the moment as well. So what do you think are some of the skills security leaders need in order to really successfully lead their teams and inspire them to take responsibility for beyond just their role?
So number one, I mean, from a technical side, again, you have to know your stuff, and you have to have grown up through security in terms of, you don't need to have 20, 30 years in it, but understanding all the different aspects of security, you need to be able to lead when things are in a crunch. So having the technical background definitely helps. And in terms of the soft skills, I mean, having that sincerity and being authentic, I think really helps as you're building the relationships, not just within the department, but also across the organization. And people can definitely tell if you've got somebody authentic in executive leadership. And that makes all the difference in the world, because people then really want to be a part of the bigger picture, and they work extra hard, and they really understand the message, and they take it as more than a job. We have a great team. I mean, the way we all, when this all started, the whole COVID-19, it's like, oh, we're all going to work from home starting, tomorrow. And everybody just kind of came together, rallied, and we're all working Saturday, Sunday to make sure everything was going to be up and ready for everyone to be able to work from home. And it was just having that personal relationships with different people, not just the leadership team, but also our staff and our team members. So having that sincerity, authenticity, and just being able to build those relationships and having that open communication style is so critical, and for any CISO or any executive leader.
Yeah, I think it's prime time for CISOs. I was on a call last night, and that was exactly one of the things we were talking about was, the conversation now needs to switch from working from home. And I think that topic is so overdone, oversold, written, overdone, just over it. I don't know about you. Over it. Over working from home. Over it. I was over it 2 weeks after it started. I was over it. I couldn't watch a webinar. I wouldn't answer an email. In fact, I put WFH in my spam filter.
Wow.
Yeah. I could. Look, a predominant amount of people in security, I think a predominant amount of people in executive leadership in security have the ability to work from home and do work from home. Not full-time, not like we've been forced to do because of this crisis, but part-time. I mean, people work from home. They do, I mean, it's just nature. And so yes, there was a big transition of getting all your people in, but really it just changed the endpoint. I mean, and it changed the discussion of what an endpoint is forever. That discussion of what an endpoint is, the whole idea that we can build this, I like to call it the Simpson movie shell, right? Just putting like this. Oh,
right. Yeah, the big dome.
The big dome. Boom.
Yeah.
And that dome is your corporate network, and you can control everything that comes in and goes out of that network. That discussion is so old school, and people were still having that discussion. And
right.
I think the younger version of, and I won't say the younger version, I think the more progressive cybersecurity executives realize that the endpoint discussion is really the device. It's really the device. It's not the network. It's not that workstation. It's the device.
Right.
And so that's why you see a lot of the EDR and MDR products really excel over the last 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
Especially now after COVID. They've really excelled. But it's CISO's time to step up to the plate and really show leadership on an enterprise level. how do you see what more do CISOs need to do to really excel on an enterprise level, get more visibility, which helps obviously the security case within an organization?
So for us, from a very tactical point of view, we had to basically show what we've done to help secure everybody. Because, most of us did work from home off and on, maybe 2-3 times a week or whenever we needed to. But there is a group of people who never had the ability to work from home because they were just that they couldn't. So for them, being able to put them into a position where they could work from home and still conduct all their day-to-day business, that was a huge win. And making sure that we can show that through data and show the metrics and show, that we are covered. And through the insider threat program, hey, look, we did find people were doing some funny stuff, but look, we found it and we killed it right then and there. And being able to show them those metrics and show them those use cases and the solution that we put into place, to the controls that we put into place, that's made a huge impact on everybody. That showed our board and all those executives up top that this can be done, it can be done effectively, and it's nothing to be concerned about. So if this continues to go on for a little bit longer, completely prepared, and it does change the future of how we're going to continue as a business, like, do we go ahead and we allow this? More people will be able to work from home regularly, and it's not going to be a big issue. And even those that we thought couldn't before, they will be able to. So it's really changed. And of course, those products that are out there, like the EDRs and whatnot, they're definitely fast track to make sure everything was covered, each and every single device was covered, so that we didn't have any gaps. And those products really, they've made a huge difference.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The smarter organizations are the one that didn't put out the fire, but really put out the fire by planning ahead. And I think if you, I'm a history buff. You've known me for a while, so I love history. Yeah. And one of the things a while, yeah. So one of the books I was looking at was the Spanish flu. And it's kind of like a history book, so it's nothing interesting. It's not a fiction or nonfiction. It's not a story. It's just talking about, a lot of it talks about the human life during from essentially the start of the U.S. all the way to Vietnam. It's a slew of history and slew of different things that impact this country, from wars to internal wars to state wars to the Revolutionary War, Civil War, and then World War I. And when you look at the Spanish flu, you realize the organizations that succeeded in surviving the Spanish flu of 1917 and 18, because the Spanish flu went on until 1920. And I think that's often, people think, oh, Spanish flu went on for a year. No. It was like 3 years. And it started in 1917. That was like the first wave. It wasn't so bad. Second wave came through and killed millions. And that was a whole other thing. And back then people traveled in ships.
Right.
Titanic happened around the time of the Spanish flu, folks.
Man.
So smart security organizations really do plan ahead, and really do realize that there's going to be a second and a third wave to this, and we are going to go back into quarantine at some point again, whether it be for 2 to 3 weeks, whether it be 5 weeks. I think it just depends on your population areas and population areas. Like, just if you're in New York, you're probably going to go into a 5-6 week quarantine, because that's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
Right? People live on top of each other and under each other, and
exactly.
And I thought California didn't get it as bad as I thought. The governor there did an excellent job. I mean, beyond to anything, I think he took it seriously. I think he's overstepping his powers now. I think shutting down beaches is just dumb. Let people go to the beach. They need to be in open air, right? That's just. I mean, I went to Lake Lanier last weekend on Sunday. It was packed.
Oh, really?
Packed.
Oh, wow.
But people were still practicing social distancing. Right?
That's the important thing.
Right?
Yeah.
People were on their boats. People were on their jet skis. It was, families that were on their boats all on their own. People were being responsible.
Yeah. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Kind of switching to cyber fraud analytics, as you look at how much time you spend on that, what are some of the trends that were happening maybe before COVID-19 that COVID-19 really excelled, or did fraud die with COVID-19 only to come back? I mean, did fraudsters go into quarantine too?
Not at all. I think this is like their happy time. They really upped their game. But it's interesting because their tactics have changed in a way. We're seeing a lot more of the patient fraudster. They obviously feel like they have a lot more time, so they're putting a lot more thought into how they're attacking. And it's interesting because first we'd get more of the, I don't know if you want to call it smash and grab, but it kind of felt like that, like just all out, like we're just going to hit the company and try to get as much as we can, as many, impact as many accounts as possible. And now it's more like they're sitting there, they're waiting. There's a lot more of SIM swap happening, which takes a lot more effort and a lot more, hey, social engineering, dig up all the information you can on this individual, call up the carrier, pretend you're the individual, get them to switch all the information over to you, and then open the new account. All the OTP information goes straight to that fraudster. And we're seeing a lot more of that happen now. And it's really interesting to see the sudden change we had as soon as we all started working from home. And I think it's just a matter of fraudsters, like we're all online constantly.
Right.
I think that's kind of opening us up to more of this, just because whereas maybe we didn't spend as much time before, we do now. And so they're having, I think, a field day with researching and getting more information from everybody. And even with kids just being online all the time, it's like, review your safety, cyber safety rules, because they're just on it every day.
One of the things I thought of, and it kind of crossed my mind, is before COVID-19, doing fraud wasn't hard because people were in the same office. So if you got an email from John and John was 3 doors down, you didn't really talk to John.
Mm-hmm.
You just did it, right? Or if it came from Mike and Mike's on the 7th floor and you're on the 4th floor, you didn't pick up the phone. You were like, oh, right. It's Mike. I saw Mike in the elevator. I saw him in the coffee room. I saw him at a meeting today. You don't really question it. I think fraudsters now realize that people spend so much time on Zoom calls and so much time on conference calls that when they're getting these emails, chances are, if it seems like it's awkward or a weird request, they're going to pick up the phone and call that person, or better yet, they might be on a call with them. So they're trying to finesse their way to get people to do that. That's what, if I was on that bad side, that's what I'd be. I wouldn't be, my way of doing BEC would have to absolutely change.
Yeah, I definitely think so, because now, it's weird. I almost feel like, for us at least, it's so easy for us to just pick up the phone and just call a person and say, hey, what's going on, right? Like we're always, all day long, one conference call after another, constantly on WebEx, and just a lot of information being shared. And sometimes I think I've talked to some other people in the industry where they weren't ready for this, right? So they didn't have like the shared repositories where they could land a file and have maybe a vendor pick it up or whatever it is. And so they're still like, hey, we'll just, or even like within the company, they didn't have a shared repository. So they're just emailing it to one another and didn't have the proper controls in place. So I think this has really exposed us, in my opinion, that, we've actually introduced a lot more risk, because now we have people who are very excited that, hey, I have to get this job done. Whereas before it was just like, hey, we'll just send it. Now we're working with depending on the company again, some people weren't as up to speed as they needed to be. And their security wasn't in place. They didn't really have the VPN connection. They didn't really have their VDI set up correctly. People are using their personal laptops. And, I spoke to you about this, and then I just kind of got more curious and talked to a few other people in the industry, and I was surprised. You were very right about that. People, I lived in a little bubble. I've worked at really big companies. I'm very lucky for that opportunity. But the problems we had so different than other companies, where their information was just kind of sitting out there and they're just emailing it out to each other, and that has been intercepted. So it really depends on the organization, I think. But in terms of BEC and just, there's so much more you could eavesdrop on, and there's so much more that you could be, if you're using Zoom, we all know what happened there. And it's really interesting to see the different.
But the Zoom issue one, I think people are so quick to, whenever I tell someone I work in security now, they go, oh, well, what do you think about what happened to Zoom? And I'm like, nothing happened to Zoom. So they had a few security vulnerabilities, which, by the way, they patched and owned up to it right away.
Right.
Awesome response. Number one. Number two, hey, user, change your conference call ID. I got to tell you, in the first 2 weeks of this, I had so many Zoom calls, and it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. I'll tell you why. Someone will send me a Zoom invite, Kausar, and I'll join the Zoom call, right? So our call's at 4 o'clock, and I'll join at 4.
Right.
And they're in the middle of like a sales
another
pitch,
meeting?
and into another meeting. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is real? And, like you're on the tail end of a meeting. So typically it's always like some juicy detail, right? Like, we can give you a 15, 20% discount. And I'm like, gotcha.
It can't be done.
I want a 25% discount. Why are they more special than me?
Exactly.
Right? Like it's really like, just practice hygiene, pay attention. Don't work fast, slow down a little bit. COVID-19, if it did anything, it slowed us down a little bit. It allowed us to really sit back and think about every click before we did it.
See, and I think what you just touched on, it's the user's responsibility. Now, I'm looking at my parents who, wow, they're pretty new to technology, right? Like they get on Zoom calls to do their Arabic class and whatnot, and they had no idea how to do it, right? So it was like me from here FaceTiming them, and they're trying to point at the laptop and show me what's going on. I'm like, oh, wow. So, we're trying to figure it out, but I'm like, the people who are using it, my parents who really technology, no, it's not happening. And then my 8-year-old, so she's doing Zoom meetings with her class, and it's up to people who know, the adults, make sure that they're safe. And I think that's just it, coming back to responsibility. It always does lie with the user. But having something, definitely, it's just opens you up to so much more risk. And if it's not easy to use and people just don't understand the basic concepts, it's going to be a problem. So it's just interesting. No matter what we use, it's like foundational cyber hygiene, those rules, you have to abide by them. And you need to make sure, if you're going to use the tech, you need to understand a little bit. But also, just I think helping out the elderly and helping out the little kids who are just trying to get to their Zoom class meeting and chit chat with each other, making sure that they have the right security controls in place, and then having tools like Zoom again, once they fixed everything, great. And just even with WebEx, I did that the other day. I called in and was on the tail end of a meeting, and I'm just like, ooh, I should really get out of this. So I just, click out and sorry, didn't mean to jump in.
Well, I don't apologize. I think I'm owed an apology when that happens. You scheduled a meeting with me. You're obviously late to the meeting. You didn't send me an email or a notice to let me know, hey, can we push this back 15 minutes?
Right.
And now I got to play, conference call tag. I got to try again. Like, all right, I'll give him 2-3 more minutes, and then I'll jump back in. And you jump back in, and they're still in it. And you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm not jumping back in again.
Text me when you're ready. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm done. And if I started something else, we're going to have to reschedule. Like, I just feel like that's been one of my lessons learned for people around this thing. I'm just like, respect each other's time and do it.
Definitely.
Be on time, get it done on time. And we do miss human contact. Yeah, I miss getting together for coffee with people, and I miss going and working at my coffee shop and just, kind of hanging out there and I miss it. But at the same time, if I'm scheduling a happy hour or a conference call or whatever it is, 4 o'clock's 4 o'clock. At 3:55, you get it. Everyone gets a notification that your next meeting's in 5 minutes. You know what that means? Wrap it up. Yeah, Dave Chappelle. Yeah. Wrap it up. When you look at security projects, you've done a bunch of very, very, I think one of the most fascinating parts of your role is you've always been involved in very fascinating projects that take fraud and user behavior analytics and cyber, and you put it all together. What's one of those projects that you really enjoyed working on?
Well, honestly, I've been really lucky in terms of I do some cool stuff. Like it's some really interesting stuff that I get
Yeah.
to work on because you get to see like the human side of it too. And you really do have to dive into that side of, like we talked about before, you have to dive into, if I were a criminal, this is what I would do. So I think one of the insider threat program, definitely extremely interesting, especially when you're looking at internal insider threat and then going into the insider fraud. So looking into, one of the cases I had in the past was, um, we had a whole bunch of credit cards go missing, and they had been mailed out to the different clients. And it was pretty cool because doing the analytics, it was like, all right, well, number one, all the people lived in one area. We have an office out there, and guess what? Guess who's been linked? Who's touched each and every single one of those accounts? And so it was just, and then we had the second part where it turned out that there was some collusion involved with the vendor, one of the people who worked there. And it was just like, man, you ended up taking down a whole bunch of people. So it was pretty cool to see like how all the parts just kind of came together to fit into one big puzzle. And it's just amazing what you can do, just tracing the data back and doing the data mining and looking for those frauds, the patterns and the trends. So I think that was a pretty cool project that we had. It took a little bit of time because at first it was just getting the right data, which is always fun. But compiling all the data we needed to start that investigation, and then going through and having to, be there in the interview room and talk to the individual and, hey, this is what we've got here. And, just kind of, it's the closest I'm ever going to get to being my lifelong dream of being an FBI agent. So it was just really cool to, sit there and kind of talk to them and be like, well, bam, here's the evidence I have. Now explain it. And it was just incredible to be able to collect all of that and just have like this solid case, which you could not sit there and deny anything. And it was really impressive, like the team, the effort that they put in to be able to pick apart every single little detail and put timestamps into when things were looked at and tie different logs together. So it was just telling that whole entire story from beginning to end, and then having, legal and HR go, wow, that's an issue. And, everything that followed suit after that. So it was just really cool to see it all come together like that.
That's I love hearing about projects like that where you start to track the human aspect of cyber fraud, and you kind of start to trace human behavior, and it becomes predictable, unpredictable, with twists and turns. And sometimes it's pure just stupidity, and other times it's just brilliance. You're amazed of, wow, they did
Yes.
that for this. You could have done so much better than that. Like,
Exactly.
you're so smart. Like, apply it for
If
good.
you used your powers for good, yes.
Yeah. That's such a fascinating, to me, it's so fascinating when that happens.
It is. And it's just amazing to see, like, because you know certain people, and so you're looking at it going, there's no way that person would do this, because you have all that data, and you're going, there's no way. And like, good people make bad mistakes, and I think that's the biggest piece of this that you go into the insider threat program with, that you think about that fraud triangle, and you think about the pressures that they may be under, the rationalization for doing what they're about to do, and then the opportunity that was presented to them. And you take those three factors, and that's what I build my insider threat program off of, because quite frankly, that's what it comes down to. There's something going on, whether they're just really ticked off and they hate their job and they really want to make the organization pay for them not getting promotion or getting a raise, or it's somebody who's in a horrible financial situation and they feel like they have no other option. And then there are opportunities where when you see somebody struggling, you can intervene. A lot of organizations these days have different types of programs to kind of help, like whether it's kind of talk to a counselor or whatever it is. And these are free programs that are run by a lot of organizations these days, just the benefits you have. And those are helpful. You can actually kind of nip it in the bud if you have these types of programs available at your organization, and letting a person know, like catching those first hints of something's happening here. This is out of the norm for this person and we need to help them. Getting in there at the right time can really help you from the event ever happening. And it's knowing your people. And again, comes back to leadership. Are you sincere? Are you, excuse me, authentic? And do people feel that they can come and talk to you? Because as a leader, your team is going to come tell you all sorts of stuff. Like they'll just open up to you and, I'm really going through some stuff right now. Yeah, as a manager, you have to watch them a little more carefully, but at the same time, you can coach them, you can help them, and you can introduce them to these programs if they're not aware of them. But I think in terms of leadership, that's another angle that all leaders have to keep in mind. When you have a team, you're responsible for that team and not just their career success. You also have to kind of help them with their emotional and mental state in terms of, hey, just at least come talk to me. If there's an issue, if there's a challenge, I'm not trying to be your counselor or your therapist or anything, but let's have that open communication so we can help each other out. And if there is something I can do, let's work on that. So I think that's really important with the Insider Threat Program. And then we definitely have a big chunk of training, and then just, hey, how else can we get people deter the anomalous behavior that we start to see sometimes?
When you look at some of the challenges that practitioners have been working on, what challenges are you seeing cybersecurity practitioners starting to overcome, and what challenges are we still have a long road ahead to really master?
Well, I think something that we're starting to overcome, I think for a while there, people were forgetting about what we were just talking about, the basics of cybersecurity. And I think that was said and repeated in so many different venues, like be it webinars or whatever. People kind of took a step back and went, oh yeah, wait, we forgot about this. And so they're kind of going back and they're looking at their cyber foundation and rebuilding. And that's great, because instead of going for all the sexy new products, fix what you have. Right. And make sure you're doing that right. And then come all the sexy new cool products. So I think people are that is definitely improving. In terms of where we need more help, again, I'm talking from a purely analytics perspective. I think a lot of people are really excited to use analytics and to get that type of insight, but they don't really think about the foundations of those analytics, which is all the data and making sure you have the correct data and it's all available in one central repository and it's all accurate and it's timely and it's the data quality is there. So I think that in terms of where we need to go, analytics can give you a lot of insight and all the tools that we currently use in cybersecurity, and there is no shortage of tools. There's so much data out there.
Nope, there isn't. No shortage of tools. You've said it. In fact, they grow by the day. They're like mushrooms after rain. They just spring out of nowhere.
Right. Exactly. And I think, and even with that, with the tools, I find it really interesting that when you go to an organization, you find that they haven't implemented the entire tool. They've just kind of implemented one or two little pieces, and they haven't taken the time to fully implement everything that they've purchased. And that right there is a problem. And then once you've integrated it, you've integrated, are you feeding that data back so that your data scientists and data analysts can do something with it? And that's the part that a lot of people are missing. So when you do bring an analytics team in place, do they have what they need to give you the insights that you need to make the better business decisions? And I think that's a part where we still struggle with, because very quick to buy stuff. Very quick to hurry up and implement so that we can solve a problem. We're being reactive still, but we need to plan this better, be a little more proactive, and actually think about the whole entire data flow, which will in turn really help you get some insight into, number one, is that tool even really working for you? Number two, is it the best tool out there? Like, have you done your due diligence and actually compared similar tools? And number three, what other insights are you possibly missing that you could tie into other data feeds that you're just not doing because you didn't even know you had that data? And I've seen that at every organization I've been at, where it's, hey, they purchased some big tool that's supposed to solve all their problems, didn't think about the actual cost of ownership perhaps, and so they went ahead and just kind of half implemented it, and then they ran out of funds. And then, okay, so now we don't have everything we thought we'd have. Are you doing this with it? No, we didn't know we could do that. We haven't turned it on yet. So I think that's a big piece of more of the planning and being proactive and really seeing, if we're going to purchase this, what is that total cost of ownership? And then let's implement it all the way through.
Right. I think implementation is such a critical piece of that. You're absolutely right. When I always ask this question as for this new Sista Talk format, one of the things I put on when I looked at that question, I go, I wonder how many people are going to say implementation is something we need to do better. because
Right.
a lot of times we buy, you know, a product that really is, you can really put it across the enterprise, and it has underlying data that sometimes even the guys that are selling it to you don't know that it's able to provide you. And that underlying data could replace or even boost a threat intelligence feed that you're getting.
Yes.
Or so much more stuff. It allows you to put together a greater picture. And, you know, we hear about SOAR products, right? And you go, oh, SOAR, great. That's what SOAR does. And you're like, kind of, but really, you're kind of able to do your own SOAR if you just really just understand and implement the little products you put on your network, or the lot of products that you do, and implement them correctly and maximize their usage. It's really funny. I see people like that have like 3 or 4 different AVs on their devices.
Right.
And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Just get
That's
one
the
really
thing.
good one. Just buy one really good one.
Yeah, that seems to be the problem. And it's just, it's, again, it comes down to planning. Like, do you really have your PMO involved in this, or, you know, are you really working with finance, and do you really have an inventory of all the tools that you actually have, and the status of each of those tools, like how far you've moved ahead and how much of it you've implemented? Every organization, James, I'm kid you not, every company I've been at, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, we have this and this and this. I'm like, those 5 things all do the same exact thing. Some may be better than others, but what is the point of, I get data and defense and all, like layers of defense, but this is a whole other, this is nonsensical.
Well,
This isn't layers of defense.
Defense in depth doesn't mean have 5. You know, it's funny. I've had the same discussion, and, you know, being kind of, I give an example of it, and I go, you know, war before, you know, in the 1800s and 1700s, when they had muskets, they'd line up men, one after the other, right? And if you were on the front line, you were pretty much guaranteed to die.
Right.
Like, that was like, you pissed someone off, they're sending you to die. It's gonna take you a minute to load your musket. You better hope you shoot someone before someone else shoots you.
Yeah.
At least take someone out before you go out. And having 5 of the same things is like having 5 men with muskets in 5 continuous lines. Once I take one down, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going. I think the idea of defense in depth is so much more than that. I think the idea of defense in depth is, I've got that one line, and then behind him, I've got a guy on a horse, and then behind the guy on the horse, I've got a guy in a Humvee, and behind the guy in the Humvee, I have a tank, and behind the tank, I have a warship, and behind the warship, I've got I've got an airplane, and behind that airplane, I've got a helicopter, and you know, I mean, that's defense in depth. Is you're making it harder to get through the layers and layers and layers of defense. You're not giving him, you know, you're not building the same fence 5 times over, but you're rather, you know, you can have one outer fence, and then you can be digging. One fence could be 10 feet deep, another one could be 20 feet high. You know, just as people try to go, they always tackle something else, and every time you're getting an alert that lets you know there's something going on. That's so true. That seems to be, I think, in some immature programs where money's plentiful, and that seems to be a challenge. Is you go and you buy so much stuff,
Right.
and then you end up with just half implemented stuff, and that's really bad. Kind of.
And then it's also like with new CISOs, right? Like with every time you get a new change of management, they bring in the tools that they know and they prefer. And so it's like, you may be in the middle of implementing something, and you get a new CISO or a new CIO, and they're kind of like, oh, well, I heard about this, and let's just go down this path. And you're like, so then you got to stop and then start again with something brand new. And it's just, there has to be a better roadmap and a better strategy, and just stop buying stuff. Let's take inventory of what we have, and let's figure out what it actually solves for, what risk it's solving for, and move from there.
Well, I think that's partially also not the CISO's fault.
I don't think so.
And I'm going to come out here and kind of like, you know, just let's say it for what it is. You're getting 150 emails a day from vendors trying to sell you shit. Yeah, right. You've got relationships with vendors who you appreciate, who you value.
Right.
And when you have a problem, you're calling those people. And when you're talking to your trusted vendors, your trusted partners in security, oftentimes they're looking at this as another sales opportunity. And so sometimes you really do have to step away from people who have an interest in selling you something and kind of put your problem in a bucket where people are going to, throw advice your way that's really going to help you and not just get you to spend money. And that kind of brings me to our final question before we go into our insight round here and our lightning round, and then we wrap up the podcast. But as a community, we do a lot of really good stuff to help each other. What are some of your best practices? What are some of the things that you do day in, day out that are kind of like, hey, this is what keeps me sharp, keeps me effective, keeps me going?
Well, I do listen to a lot of different podcasts. I do a lot of reading. Love to keep updated with the latest trends and what's happening out there. There's actually one guy I listened to who was a former on the FBI's most wanted list, spent some time in prison, and he actually goes into great detail about how he committed his fraud. I actually really like listening to him because it gives me a whole other way of thinking, and I think it's really sharpened that side of my brain. Like now I understand how he did it, which helps me start thinking more along the lines of how I would do it if I ever, need to analyze that type of incident. It's really helpful to listen to all sorts of people from different walks of life who may have played around with it. So definitely, taking classes always helps. I'm always trying to learn something new. GCP is my latest, and Amazon, GCP both have such great fraud detector tools, and they've got their cyber models going on. So it's really interesting to see what other companies are doing right now to fight the battle and learning from them. So that's extremely helpful. And of course, reaching out to my mentors and talking to my peers in the industry because they're seeing similar things and they're approaching it a little bit differently. So it definitely helps to get everyone's opinion on what they're doing. Don't need their secret sauce, just need to understand what are you seeing, and high level, what are you guys doing about it?
So I'm gonna call you out. No, there's no such thing as secret sauce. I feel like the only time you have a secret sauce is if you're in a room full of salespeople. Then you've got a secret sauce. I think when you're with your peers, I miss our coffee meetings. I think we haven't done those in a while. Even before COVID, we all got so busy at the beginning of this year.
Right.
And it was just really crazy. But, when we'd sit together for coffee, there was no secret sauce. It was just there.
No, but that was different though. I mean, still, like if I'm talking to I wouldn't give my code to somebody like, oh, hey, this is exactly word for word my code. But that's what I'm talking about, secret sauce. I mean, when we would talk, we talk about everything, and it was just like, hey, this is what we're seeing. What are you seeing? And and I think that's all fine. But it still comes down to in terms of my organization now, and if I'm talking to another organization, definitely can't share the algorithms that we're using because that does become proprietary information. So, drawing the line there. But aside from that, everyone's really open about, hey, this is what we're seeing. And that's what
this is what we're seeing and this is what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I need to know. I'm like, this is what we're seeing, and hey, this is what we think we're going to do about it. That's all I need to know. We'll figure out the algorithms on our side. But if you're willing to share that kind of information, and kind of going back to the whole Israel trip, I was amazed at how forthcoming everybody was. And I still think here in America, we have a little ways to go before we get to that point of openness. But there, people wanted to share information because they knew that by sharing that type of information, you're just helping others, and you're also getting in turn, and that's helping you get smarter and be more aware of what's going on. And I do see that change now. Over the past few years, I've seen people are, we go to different conferences or even whatever it is, people are more willing to share information. FSISAC, you do see people sharing a lot of good information there. There are different, the siphon alerts that you get. People are sharing that information, and it's great to see more FIs and more other companies are jumping on to share that type of information. See, hey, this is what we're seeing right now, and here's some information, so maybe you can lock down that account too, so you don't see the same thing happen to you. So it's pretty cool that people are getting better, and that's great to see that we're being a little more helpful to each other.
Absolutely. So, folks, it's time we wrap up this podcast with our CISO Insight Round. So here we go. You're going on the hot seat, Kausar. One buzzword you would bury and never have it come back again, not even in a zombie apocalypse.
Big data.
Big data.
Hate it.
One technology that will forever change cybersecurity.
The cloud. Definitely. The cloud.
The last book you read.
Okay, this is embarrassing, but it's a Goosebumps book I read for my 8-year-old daughter. Wanted to make sure it was age appropriate for her, and so got sucked into it and read the whole thing.
And last movie you saw?
I See You, which I highly recommend. It was good.
Was it good?
It was good. You should watch it. You'd like it.
I'm on this documentary binge right now.
Oh, really?
I am. I'm watching the documentary on the Unabomber, and it's one of the only interviews Ted Kaczynski ever did with a reporter.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's his own words. Like, you hear him talk about every bombing, his manifesto. Just very fascinating, a look inside that man's brain that terrorized this country for 20, 30 years. Just...
Well, that sounds interesting.
Very, very interesting. I've been on the documentary binge ever since COVID-19.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Your favorite music?
It depends on the mood. Really does. If I'm programming, it's got to be techno. I don't know why, but it just keeps me pumped and keeps me in the space. There you go.
And one thing you took away from this COVID-19 crisis?
Number one, so grateful that we all have jobs that we can work from home. There was a time in my life where I was a receptionist at a health surgery center. Never would have happened in that situation. And secondly, relationships matter so much. Everybody, needs to hear, how are you? And it really helps morale, and it really helps build your relationship further with your team and across the organization. And just having that human touch makes all the difference.
Folks, that was our CISO Insight Round with the awesome, magnificent Kausar Kenning. And with that being said, the time has come to depart and wish you folks an enjoyable rest of the day while you are listening. Kausar, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, James.
I really appreciate you coming back and kind of with the new format and supporting it. And I'm grateful for that. Folks, we are wrapping up. You can connect with Kausar on LinkedIn. Her names is right below. I'll actually throw that back on the screen so you guys can see it. Connect. I promise you, great person to kind of have in your back pocket to run stuff through. You won't be disappointed. That's it for us here this week on the CISO Talk podcast. We'll have a lot more guests coming up. You can go to our website, cyberhubpodcast.com, click on the CISO Talk button and check out our next and upcoming podcast. If you want to be a guest on the show, you can also apply to be on a guest right there. That's it for us here this week, folks. My name is James Azar, and until next time, folks, stay cyber safe.